Hi, my name is Susan Doyle from Box Media, and I'll be your moderator today. I would like to welcome you to Lean Construction Ireland's 17th webinar, the topic of which is Rapid Problem Solving in Action, presented by Maria Ryan. If you have a question, please type it in the question box and we will consolidate and ask Maria in the second half of the webinar. If there are any questions that we don't get answered during the webinar, we will follow up by email afterwards. The agenda will be as follows: opening introduction by Jason Casey, and then the presentation by Maria, followed by questions and answers. I will now hand you over to Jason.
Thanks very much, Susan. Hello, my name is Jason Casey. I'm an Operations Manager at Ardmach and Director at Lean Construction Ireland. This webinar is being brought to you by Lean Construction Ireland in conjunction with media and communications partner Box Media. For today's webinar, the title is Rapid Problem Solving in Action, which I'm really looking forward to hearing about. The speaker for today is Maria Ryan. Maria started her career as a mechanical engineer working with companies including Cross Refrigeration, ADM Pfizer, and Diamond Engineering. In 2008, she became one of the first black belts certified in Ireland while working in Honeywell, where she held roles including black belt, continuous improvement, and quality manager. On completion of her corporate MBA, she worked with Johnson & Johnson deploying Lean across the organisation. For the past 10 years, she has supported companies on their Lean journey across sectors including medical device, pharmaceutical, aerospace, food, healthcare, software, engineering, and has now started to support the construction sector. She is an experienced change agent and brings a passion and energy to deploying Lean and engaging people with this exciting journey. I will now pass you over to Maria to start the presentation.
Thanks very much there, Jason and Susan, for the introduction. So my name is Maria Ryan, and I'll be going through the presentation today on rapid problem solving. Thanks very much for joining the webinar, much appreciated. And I've been very much instructed that it's for 30 minutes. So I have my time started here and we'll hold it to that. So what we're going to do today is cover the topic on rapid problem solving. And what we're looking for, sorry, I'm just going to go to the next slide here. So sorry about that. So what we're going to do today, I suppose, is at the end of it, I would like to be able to kind of think of three things that you'd have discovered today. So the first thing I suppose I'd like to do is cover what exactly is rapid problem solving. What does it mean? How can we approach it? The second thing then that we'll be looking at is actually how to use it. So what I'll be showing here is a template that you can follow to work through your problem solving. And the last piece then is that once you're comfortable with the template itself, kind of a list of some of the critical success factors in terms of actually deploying problem solving. So the first thing we're going to look at is what exactly is problem solving. So we're very much looking at a process here where you're talking about having a structured thought process. So what we're trying to do is go a little bit further from, say, maybe an initial fix that you might have put in place and actually going a little bit deeper. So an example that might come to mind, for example, if you're on site and you might be observing a process and you might notice that a person has to go and, spend time to walk away to get materials and then come back. So typically in that example, the fix you might put in place is to try and figure out, can we actually relocate the material closer to the person involved? So and there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. It's very much part of the process itself. But what we're looking for with problem solving is to actually go even a little bit deeper than that. We're trying to understand, in terms of the process, how have we actually set up the process, maybe that the material isn't near the person and where they're working. So we'd like to be able to figure out, maybe it's a standard work when we're setting up on site. How can we improve that so for the next project, we don't have the same issue happening? So that's really what we're looking at is that it's a structured, first of all, on how you think. And the second part of it then is that when you see the template coming up in a minute, it's very much a systematic approach in terms of working through the problem. The third piece as well that's very important in terms of problem solving is that it's very much team-based. So typically, we wouldn't be recommending that you'd actually go off and do problem solving on your own. It's very much involving other people. So in that example that I gave there, you might decide that you'd invite the person that was involved in actually going to get the material and maybe even your site manager. So you might work with 3 people to try and figure out how we can actually improve it. So I suppose that's very much the context in terms of what we mean in terms of problem solving. I suppose the why in terms of problem solving, and I think it very much links that you'll see on the bottom of the slide there, that the LCI vision is very much around to deliver projects better, faster, and together. And this very much feeds into this. It's very much a mindset. It's a culture in terms of how you actually run your organization to try and get the next project better every time. And the together piece is very much linked to that we don't do problem solving our own, we very much work with other people in the process itself. So I suppose the key benefits is that you're very much trying to continuously improve your business, one small step at a time. So that ultimately the projects build over time, that you've got a better and a faster project. Okay, so that's very much, I suppose, a little bit in terms of the background, in terms of what actually is problem solving. So what I'm going to do is I just want to show an example here that it's a very simple example where I'm just going to give you 10 seconds. So I'm just going to go silent for about 10 seconds. And I'd like you to have a look at the box. And the instruction is basically in the text box below to identify the number of Fs that appear. So I'm just going to give you 10 seconds to do that check to see how many Fs you actually count in the box. So in this example here, you probably have, I suppose, different answers in terms of what can actually appear. So for some people, when they read this, they might see 3 Fs. Some might see 5. So I'm not sure how many you actually saw when you counted it. Some people might see even up to 8. So the idea here is just to show you're observing a process in action, whereby you're looking to count the number of Fs in the box itself. So the answer itself is actually 9. So there are 9 Fs that are actually within that red box. And I'm going to show you the answer in a moment, just in case you mightn't believe me, just to show you how it looks. So what we want to do here is, in terms of problem solving, is looking beyond, say in this example, that Maria Ryan wasn't able to count 9 Fs, and look at how is the process set up that would allow me to not necessarily get the 9 Fs. And if somebody else does it, that they'll get 9 Fs, and if somebody else repeats it, then again they'll get 9 Fs. So that's what we're looking for here. So when you looked at this, you might have found that the instruction was a little bit ambiguous, the red box was a little bit ambiguous. So that's what we're looking for. So as an improvement idea around that, you might present something like this. So you might go with a gray box, have the Fs in red, so make it easier for me to see them, and actually even go with a better instruction. There was a little bit of ambiguity, so have the box pop out so I can actually see it. So you'll see the example here in terms of where all the 9 Fs are. So again, you'll be able to see the presentation later to double check that there's 9 there. The key point around this, I suppose, is very much as well, I use the word process. So when you're doing this, it's not to focus as to, why Maria didn't get the 9 and let's go and maybe retrain her, but actually look at how we've set up the process so that she can get the right answer each time. So now that we've kind of done the introduction in terms of what problem solving is, the next thing I'd like to cover now is actually giving you an overview in terms of a template that you can use for rapid problem solving. So the template here is what we're going to use throughout the remainder of the presentation. The key here is, I suppose, there's kind of 2 sections to it. So this top section here is probably where we're going to focus, and in particular around where it says the problem, the investigation, the cause, and the countermeasures. So that will be the key focus for the remainder of the presentation. So I'm just going to use an example and we'll talk through what goes into each of those boxes. The second piece then here is on the bottom of the template are some of the lean tools that can support you in terms of the problem solving. So while the main focus in the presentation would be the 5 why analysis, I'm just going to touch on the fishbone so that you're aware of it if you haven't come across it before. So the other point around this, and I suppose I'm kind of re-emphasizing this as we go along as well, is very much you don't do this on your own. By all means, you can start on your own, but you need to involve other people as well in this process as you go along. So the first thing we're going to look at here is in terms of defining the problem. So I suppose there's kind of 4 questions we look to answer when we're actually doing defining a problem. So they look at the what, the when, the where, and the impact. So I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail on that on the next slide. So again, they're really what we're looking at. So you're going to look at what is occurring, where is it occurring, when did it happen, and what's the actual impact. So I'm going to talk through an example for the remainder of the presentation in connection with that a person has just had a slip. So we're looking to try in the actual facility itself. So we're going to have a look in terms of what would be the problem definition. So in this example, we're saying that subcontractor Joe Bloggs slipped on March 26, 2018 and twisted his ankle at the pump 298. So within that, you can see that, first of all, the what is occurring. So in terms of that there was a slip, where did it occur? Was at a particular pump. When did it occur? Which we have the date, and you could even put in the time if required. And then what's the impact? So in this case, you'll see that he twisted his ankle is the impact of this particular problem. So we're now going to work through that this is the problem being defined, and now we want to work through to understand what was the reasons for this, or ultimately what we call the root cause, and then come up with an action to address that. So that's what we're going to walk through in the next number of steps. Again, a key point around here when you're doing a problem statement, sometimes people have a tendency to put maybe the solution in when you're defining the problem. So in this case, again, you focus on those 4 items, and then that's your problem definition. So we don't consider solutions, only kind of the result of the problem that we see. This is just popping it into the template, so you can see that we'll build the template as we go along. When something like this happens, there will be an immediate action that you'll do. So obviously when somebody has had an injury, we will have a look at them, we'll look after them, and we'll certainly direct them to a first aider to make sure that there's no further issues. Or in this case, they may have to go out and go to A&E, for example. So the next thing we're looking at then is that once the event has occurred, you want to do an investigation. So we know that the person has had a slip. So the key point in the investigation here is very much going out and actually looking at where it happened. So when you're doing rapid problem solving, you don't want to stay in an office and work on it. You can certainly track it within the office, but the key is that you actually go to where the problem has occurred and actually observe it firsthand. So in the investigation in this example, when you went out and had a look at it, that you actually noted as well that there was oil on the ground under the pump, and actually was under 2 different pumps. So that might be part of your investigation. You may even decide to open the pump at that point, and you may find maybe something more when you do that investigation. So that's basically the kind of the second step of the process that we're looking at in terms of the key items here for today. So the next thing then we want to go on to is step 3, which is looking at the causes. So you'll see here on the slide, in terms of the causes, we have this reference to direct, contributing, and root cause. So first of all, we're just going to have a look in terms of how to come up with those causes. So this will be the template, and what we're going to start focusing on is some of the tools that you can use to support you to come up with those causes. So in this example, we'll be talking to the 5 why analysis on the template, and again, I'll just make reference to the fishbone diagram on the bottom left. So in terms of the direct, contributing, and root cause, we've put just some definitions here. What I'm actually going to do is show it in action on the next slide, so it'll probably make more sense. But in terms of what we're looking at, the direct cause is typically the first event that has directly caused the result. A contributing cause might be things that, had we completed better, would have helped going forward. But if you fixed it, won't necessarily prevent the reoccurrence. And the key thing, what we're really trying to do is find out in terms of the rapid problem solving is what is the root cause of the problem. So what do we mean by the root cause? So ultimately, this is the real reason for the problem. And if we do actually take away that real reason, that real cause, then it will actually prevent the reoccurrence of the problem. So what we're going to do is kind of to show these in action in terms of the example that we're walking through. So first of all, we have what's called the 5 why analysis. So I'm going to use this to actually kind of demonstrate the different type of causes in action. The 5 why tool can be very useful. So as I'm going to show you here just in terms of one example of how it can flow, you'll find in reality that you may do a number of different strands when you walk down through this. So that would be quite usual as well. The other thing I'd like to say on the 5 whys is very much that, whilst you're asking the question why 5 times, in reality, sometimes you might only need to go to 2 levels. So it might only be 2 whys or 3 whys, and that's absolutely fine. The idea of the 5 whys is very much just trying to encourage you to keep going until you actually get to the root cause. So it's trying to encourage that kind of a mindset. So in the example here then, we've noted that the person has slipped at pump 298. So then the first question we're basically saying is, okay, why did that actually happen? So in the example that I'm going to walk down through here, the person slipped because there was a puddle of oil on the ground or on the shop floor. Why was there a puddle of oil? Because the pump is leaking oil. So you've had a look, you can see the pump has been leaking the oil, you've gone and you've actually verified it on site. So why is the pump leaking oil? So on this occasion, you might have actually opened up the pump and had a look inside and realized that the gasket had actually deteriorated. Then you're going to ask the question again, so okay, well, why has the gasket deteriorated? So in this case, then you're actually looking at it and you realize that we've changed supplier, we've actually bought gaskets that are made of an inferior material. And then you ask the question, why have we bought gaskets made of inferior material? So the next thing you're going on to is, well, because we got a good price on those particular gaskets. And then the question will be is, why are we buying based on price? And we're looking at it to say, because the buyer is evaluated on short-term cost savings. So in this example here, you might have put in some actions at the start, maybe, for example, going to clean up the oil spill. We might actually contain the area. We may even change the gasket when we open it up. But the idea of the problem-solving approach is very much trying to get to, actually, do you know what? This is totally outside our own remit. It's actually in another business process. We're setting it up that our purchasing are being rewarded based on cost savings only, and we've missed the quality piece of it, that we need them to buy material with a quality impact. So that's the idea, and this can be quite powerful to get work down through. So as we spoke earlier, then we spoke about what's the direct cause, what's the root cause, and then what are contributing causes. So with that in mind, what we're looking at, so in terms of the direct cause, it's the first event that really caused the actual symptom in the first place. So in this case, you might say, well, look, that the direct cause is that the pump is leaking oil. So that if it hadn't been leaking oil, the person wouldn't have slipped. So it's the direct cause. But what we're really interested in is in the root cause. So an example of the root cause here is that if we actually target, in this case, say how we're actually managing our purchasing process, then we will have changed the impact in terms of the outcome that we've seen. So if we change the process whereby the purchasing is actually based both on cost and on quality, then we wouldn't have ended up with the gasket that would have deteriorated quite quickly, which would have ultimately ended up in the oil leaking and then the person slipping. So that's really the approach that we're taking here with it. The other item to be aware of as well, so they're kind of your direct cause and your root cause. The next piece is to be aware of is what we call a contributing cause. So a contributing cause is something that, had you it in place, it might have maybe caught the problem earlier, but it may not have prevented it. So it might be, for example, if you have for example, a routine check on site, maybe a preventative maintenance program, that the gaskets would be included in it. So if the gaskets and reviewing them on a frequent basis is excluded, then maybe had we included it, we might have caught it earlier. So it might have contributed to the problem, but it's not the root cause associated with the problem itself. Okay, so that kind of gives you a feel for what we can start moving into the next box in terms of the actual causes itself. So we've worked through item number 1 here, as you can see, in terms of the problem definition, in terms of the what, the when, the where, the impact. We've investigated, we've had a look at the pump itself to see what is going on. Now we've done our 5 why analysis and figured out what's the direct cause, the contributing cause, and the root cause. So what this is setting us up is that what then will be the actions that we put in place. So before we touch on that, I just said I'd pop in here as well that you'd see the example that on the original template on the bottom left, there was what's called a fishbone diagram. So again, if you wish, a tool that you can use. So if you maybe you might have noticed when you opened up the pump that there was a gasket had deteriorated, you might be looking at what else could possibly have caused the problem. So what you do here is on the right-hand side in this kind of gray box over here is we're looking to pop in what is the problem. So in this case, the person slipped can pop in there, or you can go to the next level and say, well, look, the pump is leaking. These are noted then as what we call the 6 M's. So they can be quite useful just in terms of a prompt for you to think about all the elements of a process. So in terms of the equipment, the method, the material, the impact of Mother Nature, the measurement system, and the impact of a person. So in this case here, you might see some example of maybe a machine could have been, well, look, the pump pressure might have been too high, so it damaged the gasket. You know, in terms of the method statement. So for example, if these are very closely linked, the method and the person sometimes. So, you know, I might have tightened the gasket too tight, but that was because the method statement was incorrect. Maybe the torque wrench wasn't set right, could have been storm damage, or in this case, we've actually changed the supplier and it took us down another route. So this was really just to pop in here, just to show you an example of the fishbone diagram in action. What you sometimes find when you're doing problem solving is you might actually do this first, and then when you think, okay, this is the most likely one, for example, we've changed the supplier, let's go chase that one, you might do your 5 why analysis after that. Okay, so hopefully it's making sense so far. So what you'll also notice in what we've done so far is we still actually haven't done any actions at this point. So with the exception of the immediate ones to look after the person from a safety perspective, we've very much focused on understanding. And I suppose that's the key difference in terms of this process maybe versus other ones that you may have been involved with. It's moving you beyond just fixing at the initial stage and actually going a little bit deeper to try and understand it a bit more. And again, the key point here is if you can, you try to verify the root cause. So you'd go and you'd make sure you actually check. So you talk to the people in purchasing, for example, so that it's not an assumption that you're making or an opinion that you have. It's very much using facts to support your root cause analysis. So now that we're moving on, we've the first kind of 3 steps complete. Now we want to move into actions. So again, you'll see, I suppose, in terms of underneath here, there's 3 references. It says prevent. So what's an action that will prevent the reoccurrence? And that's ultimately what we want to try and achieve. Is there a way to maybe minimize the impact? Or if it does happen, that we can detect that it has happened sooner? So there are the 3 things that we're looking at in terms of the particular actions. So the real focus in terms of looking at your countermeasures or your action plan is the preventative. How can we prevent the reoccurrence of the root cause so that this particular issue won't actually happen again? So I suppose at this point, the question would be, you know, what is the action to address this root cause here? What would we need to change to address this? So in this example, we'll be probably very much focused on, can we actually change the metrics by which the purchasing team are actually being measured? So we need to be able to bring in a quality impact. So I suppose that's the kind of key action coming out of it. You might actually do other actions. So for example, if the gasket or the reviewing the pumps isn't on a PM schedule, you might pop that in as well. You might even change the frequency of the gaskets in terms of how frequently we're changing them. So there will be some of the actions that we're looking for in here. So on the next slide, I suppose what I wanted to touch on is very much, they're kind of the definitions for later if you need it. But what I wanted to do is to bring to your attention is kind of this triangle. So in the triangle, what you're trying to do is think about what we call error proofing. So you might have heard the term either error proofing or poka-yoke, and that's the ultimate in what we're looking at. So the error proofing is the top of the triangle, where can you actually put in an action where it just cannot go wrong. So I use the example of maybe a 3-pin plug. So, you know, no matter how well I try and push it incorrectly into the socket, you can't actually put on a plug incorrectly. So that's what we're looking for here is, can you come up with solutions that will prevent the problem from ever reoccurring again? Now, sometimes you may not be able to do that. So what you can do is use this triangle here. So starting at the bottom of it, it's what we can do is say, this is what we can do. And these are the type of actions working from verbal to written to colors to sound and ultimately to prevent. As you go up the triangle, you're going to improve the quality of your solution. So, for example, you know, I can tell the purchasing person to make sure that they don't buy from that particular supplier again. However, in 6 months' time, maybe that person is working somewhere else. So now we've somebody new and they're not aware of this. So again, whilst verbal has its place, it mightn't be the ultimate solution. You can then have a sign. So at least if the person leaves, you can leave a sign behind. Color coding can be quite useful as well. So again, we'd all recognize, say, for example, safety signs. So we'd recognize emergency exit with the green sign and the white text. The next example then is can you actually use an alarm? So if there's something, it mightn't necessarily prevent, but it will certainly highlight if there's a problem. So I think the example that most people give, if you say what's kind of used in terms of sound on site, that the fire alarm would be the classic example. So in that case, again, you can have a fire alarm there. It will alert you to leave the building. However, you can still make the decision to stay if you wish. So it's only that very top one at the top, if you can design it such that you prevent it from happening in the first place, is the ultimate action that we'd like to pop in. So here we are in terms of, I suppose, the 4 key elements in terms of the rapid problem solving template itself. So we've popped in here some of the containment actions for the one we were walking through. So obviously you'll have cleaned up the spill, maybe prevent the area, and even replace the gasket. In terms of the corrective action, so you might look to maybe add a gasket check into your PMs, but ultimately the preventative one is to go after the purchasing side of things. So we want to make sure that we have the right metrics in that process. So the remainder of the template is then assigning owners to those when you're going to work through it, and then the status. So again, you can use the different color coding. We don't necessarily touch on it here, but again, you'd look to see where these actually effective. So at some point in time, you'd see, okay, we put all these actions in place. Does it actually address the problem? We actually check it for effectiveness. So I suppose that kind of covers the template itself, just that I kind of wanted to go through in terms of hopefully that you'll be able to necessarily walk through the template, use it as a guide, so don't feel a slave to it. Think of it very much as, I kind of think of it almost like my list of groceries when I'm going shopping, that here's all the things I need to remember to bring home with me. So again, you treat it the same way. So like, for example, on the fishbone, don't get too caught up if it goes into a machine or method. The key thing is that you're getting the ideas out there. So before I close then, I suppose there was just 2 other things I wanted to touch on. So the first thing is in terms of the escalation process. So in terms of the triangle that we're looking at here on the left-hand side, the JDI stands for just do it actions. So it's kind of like the immediate action that you would have in the example there. In the event that that isn't effective, then you'll try and kick in with your rapid problem solving, which is what we've covered in today's webinar. So what I would say on this is that approximately 80% of your problems are addressed using this. But in some cases, you may find that that not everything gets sorted using this particular approach. So you can go up to the next level, which is your A3 problem solving. So it goes into a little bit more detail in terms of mapping out the current state, looking for data to support the process that you're looking at, and spending more time in terms of verifying that the action that you've identified is actually the root cause. So you spend a little bit more time on it. In the event that the A3 problem solving doesn't address your issue, then you can move into maybe 5% of your time into the Six Sigma process. So this would be something that you'd have complexity around. So it would take you beyond maybe your day-to-day. So like the rapid problem solving is very much looking at if you're meeting on a daily basis, we have an issue, let's go and do our rapid problem solving to address it. Whereas the Six Sigma might be something like, say, for example, if you had, for example, if the bonding between maybe your laminate walls wasn't effective. So you're starting to get into much more data analysis and probably even having to work with your suppliers to understand the reasons behind it and getting a lot of data to support that. So I just want to flag to you that there is an escalation process that you can work through. What I'd recommend as well is that you choose, we'll say, so if you have, for example, your daily huddle, you might choose as to when you actually go to the rapid problem solving, what's the criteria? Because in some cases, the just do it actions are absolutely perfect. So with that in mind, I've kind of touched a little bit there in terms of the linking to your processes. I mentioned the daily huddle as one example. So I suppose in terms of actually, having this as a success, like it is very much looking at, bringing your whole organization, whether you're, 10 people or 600 people, that you're building up that skill set within the team. So what we kind of suggest as kind of critical success factors is, one is around, if you do have existing processes, align it to it. So if you have a meeting in the morning or a daily huddle, align it to that if, this is if this type of problem, it goes into this particular language in terms of problem solving. It does require the discipline to stop. So that will be a change because we're very focused on actions. So you'll see from the template, like it takes the 4th step before you actually move into action planning. So it's really getting you to stop, to think, to look, to observe, to understand before you move into actions. The third one is involving people. So you really can't do it on your own. If you do, you just might sub-optimize the solution. Secondly, as well, you might have already think that, okay, I know what the answer is, and you might miss something. So that's the idea of it, is to have a few more people's views on it as well. And then the last point is very important as well, about going to the workplace. So again, whilst you can certainly use an office to document it, it's really important that you're talking to the right people, asking the right questions, and going to the workplace to actually understand really what is actually happening. This is just an example to show again, so if you have a weekly work plan, aligning it to your business processes. So if you have any sort of a gap that comes up, be it in terms of quality, in terms of safety, then you look to move into your problem solving, in this case, your rapid problem solving. So what's the gap in your metric? We're going to have to make a decision to stop. Let's take some time out and let's actually solve the problem permanently. So I suppose to summarize, so first of all, I hope you found the webinar of value. I suppose to summarize, what we're looking at is that rapid problem solving, it's very much a thought process. So even if you don't necessarily even use the template, the fact that you're thinking that way, that when you're out, you're looking at it, you're trying to understand, well, what really is, the direct cause, the contributing causes, the root cause, that you're constantly going, well, what really is the problem that I'm looking at? So it's your thought process in terms of how you approach it. The second part of it then is the systematic approach. So again, it's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So you're working through it, that you avoid going from here's the problem definition and then actually going straight into the solution. So it requires, I suppose, a little bit of patience and discipline, particularly when we're probably asked when will it be fixed, as opposed to maybe, when will you have the root cause analysis completed. And the last piece there is very much that's around a collaborative or team-based approach. So again, it's very much that we work together to deliver exactly as the vision on the bottom there, is to deliver the projects better, faster, and together. So before I finish up, I'm just going to pop on, I suppose I just happen to like this particular slide. It's a little bit of humor, but sometimes, we're all very busy, including even in our own small organization. So it's always the challenge that when you're very busy, the challenge is to stop and actually make that call to stop. So I suppose that's pretty much concludes what I was going to cover in today's webinar. So I'm just going to finish up on the last slide, which is very much looking at the contact details, that in the event that you need any further information from LCI. So I suppose as I finish up, I just want to say thanks very much for everyone for listening to it. I hope you found it of great value. I'd like to thank my own team here who supported putting together the presentation. I'd like to thank Susan as well, who was fantastic in terms of the prep work to make sure that it works well. And I'd like to thank Jason as well from Ardmac, who kind of checked to make sure that the example would be a good fit for the audience. So that's it, and I've just gone over by 20 seconds, so I'm going to stop now and I'm going to hand back to Jason and to Susan.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. Just so if anyone has some questions there's a questions option on the webinar there that you can fill in your questions, and we can put them towards Maria. So Maria, that was a great presentation there, and something that certainly looks on the face of it that can be used not only in construction but in any industry or any company regardless of size. There's a few questions that have come in there throughout the presentation there. The first one was, how long does it take to complete the task?
So in terms of actually running one of these, so I suppose, dare I say, sometimes it actually depends. So it depends on I suppose, how complex the problem is. So if it's not a very complicated problem, you could have worked through it, take a walk on site and have it turned around in 30 minutes. Some of them could take, because you might have to go and actually verify. So in this example, you might have to go and talk to purchasing. They may not be available to talk to you. So it could take anything up to maybe 2 hours to get through that, to get through the actual template itself.
Okay, thank you. Another one here, how do you track your actions?
So yeah, so I suppose there's different ways that companies track it. So what I probably would be recommending is maybe not having, hundreds of them, so that you can track maybe 2 or 3 in any given week. Maybe even 1 is enough, particularly if you're starting. I think probably better to get 1 right rather than having too many in the system itself. So different companies, so some companies are happy to just have them up on their boards, and once you're finished, you can just literally rub out the template and you start on to the next one. Other companies that I suppose is very much on the maturity side of it, and they might be going for maybe things like, for example, what's called the Shingo model. The Shingo model looks for you to be able to quantify, for example, how many of these you've completed. So another way you can do it is literally take a photograph of the template that you've completed, and you can save that up maybe on a common drive. You can type it up. Once it's legible, I'd probably recommending from a lean perspective just to use the photograph and save it up, and use kind of a description that, in 2 years' time, if somebody else looks at it, that it makes sense, if you know what I mean.
Okay, what would be your suggestion there, or what the question here is, what do I do if the action doesn't work?
So I suppose, and that is important in the sense that, you can see there from the chart that, while it is a great process, it is the rapid word is kind of trying to accelerate you through to it. So you won't find that every single problem will be addressed with this. So there's two things around that, is that you'll go back and you'll have a look. So first of all, you need to understand, is it the action against the root cause was the issue, or is it actually, sometimes what you find is maybe the same problem has reoccurred, but now it's actually for a different reason. So that's probably what I'd advise, is that, if it doesn't work, so first of all, is it that the problem has reoccurred, but now it's got a new root cause? Or has it reoccurred because we haven't actually got to the root cause? So the cause and effect diagram, or the fishbone diagram, can be quite useful. So you've picked that it's the supplier, but it's actually maybe something else on that fishbone. So you might have to go back with the team and kind of revisit it to see if there's another root cause that you've got to chase.
Okay, I suppose the next one is actually probably a link to that previous question. Yep. Have you ever had a case where the system simply hasn't worked, no matter how many times you've went back to it, where you didn't get to the end, or an alternative to go to if it doesn't work, or does it maybe
exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. No, absolutely. And I suppose I would definitely say that the intention of this as a rapid problem solving is it'll hit maybe 70, 80%. You may actually find then that you've just got to move to the next level. So on that pyramid, the next level is what we call the A3 report. So you may have to go deeper in terms of your analysis. So you're going to go and you might get more information. So in the example on the presentation, for example, you might be looking at maybe the gaskets, how have they actually performed over the last 6 months? So you're now starting to get into a little bit more in-depth analysis. So you might look for the trend in terms of, well, look, in January we seem to have maybe, increased our changing of gaskets, for example. So what I'd be recommending is, if it just doesn't work, you're now going up that escalation process, maybe having maybe 1 or 2 extra people on the team, and going deeper by using the A3 problem solving approach. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think we'll have time for one final question here. Is there any other training that would enhance the process?
Enhance it. Training wise, so I suppose, so there is, I suppose, to answer the question, if you decide to bring, say, problem solving into your organization, I suppose, first of all, it depends on the size of your organization. So if it's a small size company, you can train up literally the people that would be involved in it. So I suppose that's the key thing, is that it's not just one person, but anyone that you'd like to be involved in these. If everyone is talking the same language, it's absolutely fantastic to really change the culture of an organization. You've probably come across that some people might use the belts. So again, you might decide to go maybe white. I think probably even yellow belt would be a better option, again, to try and enhance the culture of continuous improvement through problem solving into the business. So it'll go a little bit deeper on it, and you could even get into the A3 piece of it. So again, you've that understanding as to what's the current rapid problem solving, and then what's this escalation into A3, what's different about it.
Okay, that's great, Maria. I think we're all out of questions here. I don't see any additional ones popping up at the moment. I suppose I would just like to thank Maria for her insightful presentation. Also, a copy of this webinar will be sent out to everyone that attended. The next webinar is taking place on the 24th of May. We will send out the information via LinkedIn and our MailChimp distribution list on that whenever we have the details. We must also thank Box Media, our media and communications partner, for facilitating the webinar. So thanks for that, Susan. Again, thank you again from Maria and myself on behalf of Lean Construction Ireland. And you can follow Lean Construction Ireland on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and our website. And have a safe rest of the day, and be lean. Thank you.
Thank you.